everyone, welcome into my channel, Happy Place to Grow. I am so glad you are joining me today. As you can see, it's the month of October. I love October. Well, orange is my favorite color. What can I say? You know, there's so many fun decorations. When you go into stores, you see all kinds of Halloween items. And, you know, as a teacher, I love to think creatively. And so today's video, I hope, is inspiring for you, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a parent, a family member who is working with their child, if you're a homeschool family and you are trying to bring some fun into learning. I hope this video today will be fun and inspirational so that when you're out and you see all of these fabulously, spookily, crazy looking items out on the shelves, you can start thinking outside of the box. Because, you know, as a teacher, I taught for many, many years. And the one thing I discovered is that students love learning when they're having fun. In fact, they don't even realize that they are learning. I always like to think about it like this: a sandwich. Fun, serious in the middle, fun. You just kind of scoop in the learning with fun activities. My students were always engaged when I brought in really weird items for learning activities. Now, there's a lot of things out there, so as you're going out shopping, I want you to be thinking, how can I use that for a fun learning activity? I'm going to share with you some math activities today. So it's going to be focused on math. I've scooped out, I've got a lot, you know, I'm a collector, but I'm only going to share with you just a few of my top fun faves for math learning. All right, so let's get started. The first one I'm going to bring to you has to do with eyeballs. Yes, eyeballs. And so one year I was at the dollar store and I saw these really cool, creepy eyeballs, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to have those. How can I use them? And then at the same shopping trip, I spied these little rubberized, they're actually ice cube trays, or I suppose you could, maybe, I don't know if you can use them for other cooking activities, but they're for ice. And they're in a 10 frame arrangement. How cool is that? And I was like, let's put eyeballs inside of there. And you've got the perfect fun Halloween, October 10 frame activity. So what I like to do is, well, I purchased enough for my entire classroom so that each student could have their own frame, and it wasn't that expensive. If you're on a budget, you could get enough for partners to use, or you could even place it in a center. So this has lots of options. It could be done in a whole group, small group, partners, or individually at a student's seat or at a center. So here's how I would do this with my students. We were thinking about 10 frame, but we're also thinking about friends of 10, partners for 10, part plus part equals 10. But I was trying to get my students to really tune into using a pattern to help them organize their mathematical minds a little bit, especially when they're searching for all the ways that two parts can equal 10. So we would start with our frame. I always like to start with my frame without the eyeballs showing. And we talk about the fact that how many eyeballs are in the frame. Always going to be 10. We're not going to change that. And I also created, let me just put this one back here, a little 10 frame sheet for my students to log in their information as we went along. I like to do this with my students so that they could really get tuned into patterns, because we are doing Friends of 10, but we're also organizing our mathematical thinking. So the first thing we do is, how many eyeballs? And they'd say there are 10 eyeballs, and they're all facing upside down. So we would go ahead and do our first frame. And I always had my kids draw in the counters, because the frame is empty, right? And you're putting the counters in. They can't just color it in, okay? None of the eyeballs are showing, so we're going to leave them all white, right? And then over to the side, we're going to create an equation to match this. So you can do this one of two ways. You could start with 0 plus 10 equals 10, or if you're wanting them to think about the whole number first, they could put the 10, because we're starting with 10 always, equals 0 plus 10. And right over to the side, they're going to write an equation that matches. All right, so then we're going to say, okay, let's flip one eyeball. Of course, they love this. We were doing it all together. They love flipping the eyeball. And then I'd say, kids, how many eyeballs? And of course, we still have 10. We're not changing the total. We have 10 eyeballs, but now we have one eyeball showing. How many are not showing yet? Or how many are flipped? And of course, some of them right away would say 9, because they knew 1 and 9 equal 10. Some of them had to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, as they start seeing this pattern unfold, they're going to get the hang of knowing that they're only flipping 1, so they can get the pattern. So again, we're going to fill in the 10 eyeballs. And that can be done really quick. But now we're going to show that one of the eyeballs, and they can just have one crayon that they use. And I always had them fill in one eyeball. They can even make it look like an eyeball if you want. One eyeball, and one eyeball's flipped, and the rest are not flipped. So this time their equation is going to be 10 equals 1 plus 9, right? And as we go along and we're filling this in, they're going to start seeing over here, we had 0 and 10. The next one is 1 and 9. When this partner changes and gets bigger by 1, this is going to get smaller by 1. So again, think creatively. If you see something really neat at the store that can be used for math or science, grab it, scoop it up. If you teach older children, you know, you could get 2 and do a double 10 frame. You can use these for friends of 10, or you could do addition or subtraction equations. All right, that looks like fun. Now, as we're moving on, the next thing that we're going to think about is collecting information. So in math, sometimes you are collecting data or information. So one year I had these stack of lanterns, and one year I found these mini stack of lanterns, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get those. How cute, little miniatures. So what I did one year was I picked 2. I tried to pick 2 of the stack of lanterns that were very different from each other, and we had a survey. So with data, you are asking a question, and the question was, when they came in, which face do you like best? And then there were 2. Now I always would take pictures of my students every year, and they would come in and they would get their picture and their name, and then they would vote. And we would try to organize the votes in a way that was easy to look at and view and know. Sometimes you're going to get a little skew here, because if a friend votes one way, another friend comes in, they might vote the same. But hopefully they'll be thinking on their own. If you are a homeschool family, you could survey the family members and let them vote. You could go around the neighborhood together as a family, collect the information, call the grandparents. I mean, there are ways to do this if you have a small group or a large group. So, but you're thinking about fun and you're thinking about data collection and not just collecting information, but also analyzing it. And you're using those terms. So I created a little sheet we would pull together after everybody voted. And sometimes I would rearrange the votes to in an organized way so that they could see. Maybe we're going to set up, because math is about organizing your information so that when you are solving, it's easy and you have the correct amounts because you've organized things. So I created some questions. How many students liked face A, liked face B? Which face got the most? So we're going to take it a step further. We're going to be thinking about most versus least. How many more votes did it get? And I didn't put A or B in the survey questions in the analyzation part, because I don't know what the students or what the each year it's different. So just put it like that if you're creating a sheet. And that's where I always tried to organize, maybe in groups of 5 for easy counting, because you want to have the most efficient form of counting. You don't want to just be counting by ones unless you have small children, kindergarten, preschool. But when they're in first grade, second grade, you want to start organizing your amounts into collections of 5s and 10s so you can be really efficient and quick with your counting. So they're comparing the two votes. And then I always had a fun question here at the bottom. Why do you think that face got the most, in their opinion? Why do you think, and most often when I did this one, what do you think the kids voted for usually, A or B? They voted for B most often, which kind of surprised me because I like the silly face, but more kids like this weird face than the silly face. And I guess this is kind of a weird face too. So if you don't have these little stack-o'-lanterns or these little pumpkins, your kids can draw their own 2 different faces or 3 to compare and to collect information. So again, thinking outside of the box, math is fun. You're working on skills and they're having fun doing it. All right, let's get a little physical here. What does a mini pumpkin and bowling pins, what do they have in common when it's October? We're going to be bowling. But our bowling is not just for fun. The bowling that we're doing is actually going to be working on either addition or subtraction. So you're going to need a little mini pumpkin. Now I have some smaller bowling pins, but I had bought these a couple years ago and I used them for all kinds of activities in my classroom. You can see that I wrote numbers because that one year I taught 2nd grade and we were doing higher values, and I wrote when they bowled and they would add them up. So what you're going to do, and again, you can do this, and I like to do it in a small group. When I was teaching, my TA would take a group and she would do an activity and then I would do an activity. So if you can create and make a semicircle or a circle, and everyone's going to get a turn. You are setting up the pins in the frame, the triangular prism frame that they go in. And then you're working with your kids and you're talking about how you roll. This is not baseball, it's bowling, and we roll. So I either had my kids roll it on the side or they would glide it on the floor because they can get kind of wild with it. So each kid gets a turn. I have them get their math notebook out, and then they date and they label. And so what we're going to do is we also talk about students' initials because each kid's going to get a turn. Now, if you do this with adding, you would have your students one at a time. Say Johnny Flopperdopper comes up. He rolls his first roll. Just say he knocks down 2. All the kids in the group will write number 1. Johnny rolled, and the first roll was a 2. But he's going to get a second roll because if you're doing bowling, you get 2. Plus, then Johnny rolls again. Just say the second roll, he got 5 down. And I'm always up there. I'm the pin setter-upper and the pin wiper. You know, I'm the machine at the bowling alley. And so I'll take the 2 and set it over to the side. And then I would take the 5. And then I'd say, okay, everybody write that down, that expression down. Now I want you to add it, and the kids would add. And then I would add up there 2 plus 5 equals 7. And we're doing this all at the same time. Even though one student is bowling, everyone's writing the entire equation. And then we talk about initials. Who bowled that? Johnny Flopperdopper. Let's put his initials next door. Okay, now it's Susie Skunkbottom's turn. I'll set the pins back up and we keep on going. You can do this with subtraction also, but kids only get 1 roll. So that would be similar. You would do it like this. Set the pins up. Johnny Flopperdopper comes and he rolls. Whatever he gets now, we're always starting because the 10 bowling has 10 pins. So always starting with 10, but we're using our minus symbol. What did he roll down on his first roll? Just say he rolled down 5. And if 5 are down, how many are standing? And then you can see in a group who's counting the pins, or who knows that 5 plus 5 is 10. So if 5 are down, there must be 5 standing. They don't have to count by ones. So that is a skill. And as you go along, if you roll this several times, you can say, oh, we already, Johnny did that one. Remember what it was? And then you can talk about, look here, if we have 10 and 5 are not down, and 5 plus 5 equals 10. So again, you can do it adding or subtracting. I wouldn't do both at the same time. I would just pick one, and you could play this multiple days. You could have it in the center. I did have one year where my TA was doing centers, and she would set this up for them, and she had a couple others. Again, we did it in small groups so she could monitor. But it's fun, and it's physical, and you're using a cute little pumpkin. All right, you know that October is filled with the most delicious candy. Well, I guess Valentine's has a lot of candy too. But what is Halloween in October without candy corn? You gotta love them, right? They're even nice to look at. So over the years, I've gathered 2 of my favorite candy corn activities. Of course, you can buy these at the store. They're plentiful. You could, if you're a teacher, you can ask parents to send in some so that you can use these. Now, this is math that the students can eat. Eat your math. I love to say that to my kids. So you're going to want to take and do, you're going to want to do these in individual baggies for students because they're the only ones that are going to use them. And once they're done, they can eat them if they like. 2 activities. This one, I actually found this a long time ago. I think it might have been a freebie. But it looks like it's from totschooling.net, right? But you could even create one of these yourself. You could probably find an empty candy corn and then just fill it up. I mean, computers are wonderful. You could go to TPT, I'm sure, and find a game similar. It has all kinds of numbers in there, and this is an adding game. So you can do this again. I have done this a couple different ways. I play against my students sometimes. So I would have a board, all the kids would have a board, and I would take a turn, and I get to mark what I add up, and then the students one at a time take a turn. But just say Johnny Flapperdopper takes his turn, adds it up. All the kids mark what Johnny had. So the kids are a team and the teacher's a team. So if you're a homeschool family, mom or dad or grandma, and then against the student, that's fun, or against your child. If you have a homeschool group, you can bring this and they can play together. It can be at a center. It can be a morning activity when the students come in. This could be on their desk. They could go find a partner and play as a warm-up. If you're in school on Halloween Day and you're wanting to get some learning in, this is a fun way. They're sharpening their skills. So you're going to need some dice. I always love to, again, I got these years ago at the dollar store. You're going to want some dice for your students. If they're doing activities with a partner, a couple years ago, I was able to find these little containers at Walmart, and I saw them again this year. You can put 2 dice. If you have younger children who are just starting their adding skills, you can have the dot dice, or you can have the ones with numerals. You put them in, put the lid, and then they shake, stop, and there's their 2 parts in there, and the dice aren't going everywhere. I also had these dice with the little symbols on them, so you could have those if you wanted the kids to get the dice and arrange them into an equation, and then solve and add. And they're going to go ahead and cover the sum of their 2 parts and the first partner or first player to fill all of these. This would be a great time filler. Again, if you're having a Halloween party and you want to get some learning in, or it's just Halloween Day and you're teaching school and they're kind of wired, that's a fun way. And then they can eat their, covering up each space with a candy corn, and then they get to eat it. The other activity I always did with my first grade students was this measuring. Now in first grade, we're using non-standard units of measure. So candy corn, sorry that's so loud. Candy corn would be the unit of measure. Again, you're going to baggie these out for each student. This one is one that I found, well, I know I almost was going to say you're not going to believe this. The year was October, November. It was Mailbox Magazine Primary, the year 2000. I'm old. I'm an old teacher. Hey, at least I'm still here. But anyway, you could create, if you couldn't find this, you could create one yourself, get a coloring book page. And I love this one because it had it's dot to dot. And you're talking to kids about measuring, which is when they're young, you want to use non-standard because you're getting them in the mindset of measuring is comparing, using a tool to measure how long something is, how wide something is, how many candy corn does it take to measure, and then you can compare the different lines and say which line took the most units to measure. And so when I talk to my students about measuring, I'm talking about this is our starting point, because if we're measuring this straight line, we have to start where the line starts. We have to stop where the line stops. And you can talk about with non-standard measures, sometimes you're going to go over just a smidge, but not too much. And so they would have to lay their measure, their unit on the line, right? And I always talk to my students about when they're laying and you're measuring, say, a straight line, you have to go, the unit of measure has to be straight. It can't be all crooked and bumper to bumper. You don't want a space in between your measuring units. So this was a fun one. They would measure and then they would write how many. And so that was a fun way. And then they get to eat their math. How fun is that? Again, there's lots of fun activities out there, math activities I'm sure that you can scoop up on the internet. And again, you're using a seasonal treat. So don't just get the candy corn for party day. Use it for learning activities. Now, this next one, I would say, is one that the pumpkin bowling was one that I actually thought of. I didn't get that off of any TPT or anything. Before TPT existed, teachers had to actually kind of come up with their own activities, and we did because we wanted things to be fun. This activity is going to involve a tub and some tissue. Now, when I first invented this fun activity, I used sand, and then I realized how messy that was, and the kids loved it though. So I just shredded some tissue, which I keep year after year. No sense doing this every year. I pour the tissue in a tub, and then I get these fun little, they're party items, treat bag items, spider rings, and there's all kinds of colors. I've got bats, and I was able to collect over the years purple bats, orange spiders, black bats, and I don't even know where I got these. I think Walmart one year, these cute jack-o'-lanterns, and then scorpion. Anyhow, what you're going to do is you're going to collect these items, pre-count them. So decide how many jacks you're going to put in there, or whatever items that you find at the store. And a lot of times after the holiday, I go out to the stores and they've got these items 50% off or 75%. You can buy a ton of them and use them the next year because you'll be able to use them if you're doing this year after year. So you're going to pre-count how many jack-o'-lanterns, how many spiders, etc. You're going to bury them in the tissue in the tub. And again, this could be a partner activity because, again, if you've got a small group that you're working with or a whole group and you want all the kids to be engaged, you can have a parent volunteer come in and you can get some smaller tubs. You've collected a lot of these over the years. It could be a partner. It could be a center. It could be a whole group activity that you're doing on Halloween day. Again, trying to have fun, but get some skills in. And so what the kids are going to do, they're going to take turns. They reach in, they dig out a spook, a Halloween item, and then I have these labels made in little tubs. And then they're going to sort. So you're going to need to know how many are going in, so you're going to know when all of the spooks are out. We always double check, and we reach in there and make sure at the end. And as they pull out a spook or a spooky item, they're going to be using their math skills. So they would have their crayons, clipboard, and when somebody scoops out an item, we all color it. You can talk about the fact that when you're graphing, you're going up. This graph goes up. Each box stands for one item that's pulled out. I love a graph because it's an organized way for students to count and keep track of how many of each item. It's also a great way to compare which one has more, which one has less. So that's always fun. And then after you have gotten all the spooks out, then you can do some comparing. So on the back, I have some questions, analyzing your data again, how many jack-o'-lanterns they count. And of course on a graph, it's super easy to count and see. Some graphs have the numbers on the side, so that way they can scan and see how many purple bats, etc. You can also have a comparing. I love to, on a graph, have a comparing question where you could say, and you know the items in advance, so you're going to know which one has more or less. And I like to compare two things that are next to each other. How many more black spiders than orange spiders? And you can talk about comparing equal, 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 equal up. There's where there's more, because at first When kids are first looking at graphs, if you say how many more black spiders, they will count all the black spiders. But we're using a different math term. We're using the term more. Not how many, but how many more compared to the orange spiders. So we've got equal, 1, 1, and you can talk about, there's where the black column gets more. Oh, let's go up. 1, 2, there's 3 more black spiders. So this is a really great activity. It's fun. They're reaching in, they're engaged, they're counting, and then they're analyzing their data. So fun things you can do with spooky items. And if you have a massive collection, you can even let the kids pick one spider or bat ring to go. All right. Final math activity that we're going to be doing is, this one's kind of messy, but you know, Halloween can be kind of messy and creepy and gooey. This is going to involve stamps. You could do it with stickers. There's lots of Halloween stickers out. So again, we are collecting stamps. One year I was able to get a bunch at the dollar store that were already pre-stamped. You know, over the years, the stamps will dry out. So I always have the handy dandy stamp pad. You can do this. I thought of 2 different ways to use the stamps. Again, you can think in whole group, small group math, partners, center, desk work. If you're a homeschooling family, this can be done by your child on their own. So if you teach older kids, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and they're doing multiplication, you can have them stamp out an array, and they could stamp it out, or you could have the array already made on a card, and they could put the multiplication expression that would match it, and then write the total. So fun with arrays. You could do that with stickers. Also, you could make the cards, already pre-make them, and they would have to write the expression, or you could have the expression and they could create the array and then write the total. Do that. If you teach small children, you know, I teach my grandson, and he's not quite preschool yet, but if you had a preschooler that you were working with, or a kindergarten student that you were working with, you could turn those stamps into fun patterns. If you're thinking about math and patterns, they could stamp out. You could have a label, and you could say, I want you to stamp an A-B pattern. A, B, back to repeat. A's are always spiders. B's are going to be, you could get a little more complicated, A-A-B, A-A-B. So you could have the label already printed and they stamp it. Or you could say, could you stamp me an A-B pattern? And they would have to pull out 2 different stamps. And if you have these cool little already pre-stamped, which are available at this time, then they could do that. Well, you know, I've got so many more fun activities with math and spooky items or Halloween or fall items that I could share with you, but this video would go 12 days long. I mean, it would just be an endless activity video. But these are some of my very favorite fun faves for this time of the year. I want you to think as you're going out, again, if you're a homeschool parent, if you just want to have fun math activities with your kid, you want them to brush up on some skills, just say that their teacher communicates, you know, that they need to work on a certain skill. You can do it at home in a fun way. So if you're out at the dollar store, you're out at Walmart, you can pick up Halloween candy. You can pick up some Halloween treat bag items that instead of wearing a spider ring, you could use it for digging up spooks. Hey, you could even use those same little items to create your patterns or your arrays without using the stamp pads. So you could double duty those plastic. They could lay out, you know, there's array with the little plastic characters. So think outside of the box. Think of learning as fun, serious fun. Use every opportunity, every holiday, every season to create fun learning activities for your kids, the kids you're working with. All right, until our next time together, enjoy the season, eat some yummy candy, and have fun learning. All right, get out there and get busy buying some fun Halloween symbols to use in fun ways. All right, until our next time together, as always, keep it fun, keep it spooky, and have a